in a confined area, you need to try to limit as dramatically as possible the opportunity for someone to come in and introduce the virus into that facility. Nothing is perfect, but we need to certainly do the best that we can. In regard to our juvenile courts, we know that they have been the juvenile court judges who run juvenile detention facilities across the state are also working with the Chief Justice to come up with protocols. And we would hope that those, and we're sure that those will be similar to the protocols that we've announced in regard to the county jails. We have, in the last few days, announced some very tough measures for the people of the state of Ohio. My commitment, this administration's commitment, is that we're going to do everything that we can to build support, build help, build systems to help people get through what is going to be a very tough time in the next few weeks, maybe the next few months. We're really working to build that support system, but it is a work in progress, and we're putting it together each day. Let me turn to our schools for a moment. We asked the Trump administration, Department of Agriculture, to give us some waivers. I'm very happy to announce that they have given us those waivers. We're very grateful for that. Very, very quick turnaround, less than 24 hours, to enable our schools to help continue to feed the students who they have been feeding lunch, and in some cases, many cases, feeding breakfast. It's going to be up to each school. Each school is different. Some are urban, some are obviously very large geographical areas. But we know from talking to superintendents that they want to do this. They will continue to have their staff, and so they will be able to work that out. But what the waiver what was granted us allows us to basically package this food, allows the schools to package this food in whatever is the best way to do it for them and take that out to the students and students. So that is something that, again, is a work in progress, but we have cleared any kind of hurdle out of Washington. We're very grateful for that. You know, some people refer to these as the grab-and-go meals, but it's some way that you can take these meals home. I'm sure some schools will have different, every school will have different distribution procedures. Some schools will have more difficulties than others. But our departments are working with these schools to make sure that this works. Very, very important. We know that there are some children who really rely pretty much exclusively on that food that they can get from school. We've also seen our food banks, and I want to give a shout out to them. I got some texts from some of our food banks last night who said, look, we want to be part of this, we want to help, and I know that they are engaged as well. We announced yesterday that our schools would be closing at the close of school on Monday. I know some schools have actually already closed. Some schools are using today as the last day. That's fine. That's entirely acceptable, and that is up to them. We have had some inquiries if there are exceptions, and the answer, sadly, is there are no exceptions. These school buildings will be closed to children, to the students, beginning at the close of school on Monday. So there will not be any exceptions to that. Learning, though, will continue. And yesterday I was trying to, I guess, make a little light of it and referenced for our students extended spring break. That's probably not the way to look at it. What we're really talking about is schools that want to continue. All schools will be looked to continue that child's education. So the teachers will stay on, everyone else will stay on, and the education will try to continue this. Now, each school is different. Each school is very, very different. And so what one school can do, maybe another school cannot do. But our request to every school is that you do everything in your power to keep education going during this period of time. This is a 3-week period of time, but quite candidly, we don't really know if 3 weeks is all it's going to be closed. The school building itself will be closed. So no matter how long this is, education needs to continue for our young people in the state of Ohio. We do expect schools to keep the learning going. There certainly are a variety of ways that schools can extend students' education even when they're not in the classroom. Many schools have plans, I know from our office, myself, talking to them for online work, online learning options. I would point out that there's many opportunities for them to do that. There's a wealth of free online resources such as the Khan Academy that schools and educators can share with their students. We also know that some schools are not in a situation where they can have that online learning. They will improvise, they will do the best they can do. They will look at this to some extent maybe as when a student has an illness. Sometimes students are off 2-3 weeks, and schools have figured out how to deal with that. Besides school, there's ample things, obviously, for children to do. One of the things that we encourage not only children but adults to do is to explore the outdoors, stay within 6 feet away from everybody, but there's plenty of space out in the woods and plenty of things to learn out there. Children certainly can read books. Anyone, I would say, who has not signed up their child for the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, it is open in virtually every county, and we hope in the next month or so to have it in every single county. But most Ohio children are now covered. They can go online. The parents can go online. Again, that's birth through age 5. They could sign up for that. That may keep the younger members of the family focused, or maybe some of the kids who are in school can read to their younger siblings. Just many, many things that can be done. We are aware, and we've been told by some schools, that many of the lesson plans teachers have prepared for calamity days have not had to be used, and so those can be used. We will work with school leaders to make sure they have the flexibility that they need. And so every school is different. Every school situation is different. We want to be as adaptable as humanly possible. The schools have a big task. We know it's a difficult task. Again, I want to salute our teachers who do such a great job every single day. The teachers I have talked to have embraced this and have said we're going to get the job done. So this is tough for them, but I want to thank them and use this opportunity to speak directly to them. We are grateful for what you do. We are grateful for what you do every single day. And as we go through a crisis that we've not lived through, most of us have never lived through before, you are really at the forefront of this as you continue to educate our children during this period of time. It's more difficult because we don't know how long that period of time is. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for taking this on. We're very, very grateful. Let me now move to another area. We have prepared a letter. I told you yesterday about a letter that we were preparing to the Trump administration. And I'm going to ask John Husted, who has been working on this letter And I think, John, by looking at it, it's expanded beyond what it was yesterday, and we keep adding a few pages. But these are things that we need to get some waivers. So again, our whole goal, some of the tough decisions have been made, unpleasant decisions about closing schools, unpleasant decisions about nursing homes, unpleasant decisions about many, many things. But now our job is to do everything that we can to help people get through this and to create the systems that are there for support. John? Get that out of your way.
Thank you, Governor DeWine. I want to reiterate that again, that we are attempting to build that support system around the people of Ohio and our businesses and institutions who are coming together to help us get through this difficult time. As part of that, we sent this letter, Governor and I, to President Trump and Vice President Pence earlier today with requests from our agencies on regulatory and other relief that is necessary. We copied our congressional delegation. I have received calls, and I'm sure the governor has, from both members of our congressional delegation and our legislature asking to be supportive of these requests, and we appreciate that. As I mentioned yesterday, the genesis for this is that we've asked state employees to limit their person-to-person contact. But some of these state employees are the very inspectors and regulators that institutions, businesses, employees rely on to keep the flow of work going. There are a lot of issues that they need to address every day, a lot of things in the pipeline. And those institutions, people, businesses need relief as the regulated on the work and the services that they provide. One example, the governor gave a great example of this, something that the Trump administration was quick to respond on, was the USDA waiver that we requested. We have essentially an additional, let's see here, 17 requests that are in this letter. And these are waivers on things like inspection that are tied to funding, audit requirements, and the like, so that there is no or minimal disruption in these services. We don't, as I mentioned, want any regulatory delays any more than is necessary. Let me highlight a few of these issues that are in the letter so you get a feel for what we're talking about. We expect one area that could be affected are staffing levels for recertification in areas such as skilled nursing homes, home health agencies, hospice agencies, intermediate care facilities. We're asking for a waiver on these recertifications so that these individuals are not disrupted or their institutions in providing those services. Another approach that has been requested is asking for support of federal FMAP funding, medical assistance percentages. Right now, the federal government and the state government share that cost, as has occurred in previous recessions and difficult circumstances. For example, 9/11, we ask that the federal government take a bigger share of this, and then the state resources then can be put in to the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, we are asking access to the national stockpile of personal protective equipment. We are going to be soon in need of access to this equipment to keep our health care workers safe. They are on the front lines of this. They are to be commended and thanked for their service, and we need to ensure that we are supporting them with the resources that they need. Again, we understand, and I believe the Ohioans are beginning to understand the challenges that lie ahead, and this is just one step forward on building that support system that they will need, we will all need to get through this. We are working on recommendations from business leaders. We are working with local governments and other providers on expanding this list. This will not be the last time that the President, Vice President, and the congressional delegation hear from us. We're quite sure of that. But at this moment, everyone is coming together. I know I've been uplifted by some of the calls from businesses who, after the governor spoke of price gouging, that promised that they would hold prices, particularly for necessary and critical equipment, where they are. We've had internet service providers, upon the cancellation of school for 3 weeks, offer free internet service for families who have access to that broadband where they can sign up. The people of Ohio, the leaders of Ohio are responding. They're coming around this. This is pulling us together, and we're going to do our part under the governor's leadership to continue to make sure that state government is playing its role. Thank you, Governor.
Thanks, John. Let me talk for a moment about our daycares. Daycare facilities, we are not closing them at this point, but that is something that may occur in the future. And so I would ask anyone who is parent who is using a daycare to start thinking about what their alternative would be. We know how difficult this would be for many Ohioans and what a burden it would be on them. But daycares are unique, and anybody who's had children understands that or has seen their grandchildren. They pose really a unique, what I would call a unique risk. Kind of hard to enforce the 6-foot rule, and children share things, and we have all kinds of things going on in daycare. So that's just the nature of kids. So we're not closing up at this point, but people need to start thinking about alternatives. If you're in a position, economically, otherwise, and can figure out how to do it, the recommendation from the medical community is that you remove your child from daycare, if you can do that. That would be advice. I think that would be good advice. Again, as we talked about yesterday, children, unless they have a medical problem, pre-existing medical problem, they're probably going to get through contracting the virus okay. But they are carriers, and just like all of us are potential carriers. And so these potential carriers will come home, and this certainly can spread. If, and this would include people who have daycare, don't have daycare, but if your person who is taking care of your child is 60 or over, need to look at that. Again, not because of the child, but because of that person who is 60 and over. And I know that, as these changes are made, and in society generally, we have some grandparents who are in that age bracket or older who are caring for children. And we're just simply saying that, just pointing out that the risk, it goes up. And it goes up rather dramatically the older that person is. I think everybody just needs to be mindful of that, and we need to continue to say that. Jobs and Family Services has put out protocols to the daycare centers in regard to what extra effort to take to keep from the spread, or to try to cut down on the spread of the virus. We would again remind daycare, as well as every employer in the state, if someone is sick, send them home. Be mindful of whether someone is sick, even if they don't tell you they are. Because many of our daycares have done this, we're seeing some daycares that centers that are short on people. We can only expect that to continue to get more critical and pose a more problem for daycare centers. Kim Hall is here and can answer any questions, but we're changing some regulations because of this emergency. We have regulations in regard to a teacher ratio to the student. We're going to be relaxing those, again, because of the fact that we want a person to be going home if they're the teacher, if they have a cold, if they're sick, if they have a fever. We are also, Jobs and Family Services is also working with the providers to make sure they can weather this storm. We will get through this. This will last a while, but it will be over, and we'll be back to normal. And what we want is that the daycare providers to continue to exist, and that they make it through that storm, because when we're done, they're going to need to be there. And so Jobs and Family Services is working with them to help make sure that they are there. Finally, before I turn it over to Dr. Acton, I voted today, and we just would encourage everyone to vote. Polls are still open. I think they're open, John, until 7 tonight. They're open tomorrow. They're open on Sunday. They're open on Monday, and of course they're open on Tuesday. My experience in Xenia, where I voted, was there was a line, but it was a line that moved pretty quickly. So I think you're seeing this voting spreading out, and we would just encourage people to vote. The polling places are taking precautions. There's hand sanitizer everywhere. When I walked in at Xenia, they're wiping off the screens, and everybody in line was mindful of that distance. This is important, and we need to move forward, and everybody needs to vote. So let me turn it over to Dr. Acton. Amy?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I first want to start out with some of our numbers. As you know, and I apologize to the reporters here, you're going to see as these numbers go up and some of the news of the day that our website, while we regularly post it to, some of that will change as the activity goes and different people announce more at the local level. We receive all that data, but it might not be. So I'm going to share with you what I know as I know it. Right now, for certain, we have 9 males and 5 females. We now have an age range of cases, 34 years to 66 years of age, with a median age of 48. And their illnesses, not the case, because as we know, we started testing. Our first case was, I believe it's been a long week, Monday. But their illnesses started as far back as February 25th and as recent as 3/11. We've had 4 hospitalizations, no deaths. The number of counties with cases, and you'll be hearing more as more and more test results come back today. 6, we have Belmont, 2, Butler, 1, I think there's more information coming there. Cuyahoga, 6, Stark, 2, Summit, 1, Trumbull, 1. Again, it's very hard to keep up with these numbers. I'll explain that. Cleveland Clinic did get the ability to test and went live today. So they're actually doing their own testing, which is helping speed this up. And Dr. Wiley shared with me this morning that they can do 500 a day. So that is our first big surge forward in testing. And UC did announce 4 cases, I believe, as well. They have another under investigation. But they're doing a combination of our lab, and they did have, I think LabCorp was involved, a private lab. So all that comes back to ODH, and we'll summarize that and be printing that out. We do have 50 negatives. We have 159 under investigation. So again, we're up operating. three testing cycles. Our EPIs are now on, our epidemiologists, our disease detectives are working 2 shifts of 12 hours. I do want you to know, when we talk about testing and even some of the drive-through testing that the hospitals are trying to get underway, you must have a doctor's order. Health departments don't do testing. You really need to talk to a doctor, preferably at this point, call them, and they'll talk through this with you. As we see this disease spread, we will know that most of us will hopefully ride it out at home. That's so important. So you'll need to talk to your doctor. They'll decide and do a thorough history with you and decide about that testing and give you instructions on how to do that. So with that in mind, I must say I didn't mean to go viral yesterday in any way, and that has led me to want to give a little bit of a science lecture. For those of you who know, I was a professor of global public health at Ohio State for many years, and I'm going to go quickly because I know it's tiring to stand up here, but I think this is so important. I'm going to do my very best to kind of break this down in a way that's understandable. I want to walk you behind the veil of what's been happening with all of this. I've told you all along that there are, ever since 9/11, there's huge effort on preparedness that goes on at the federal level, at the state level, in my department, and at the local level, and that involves many players. And so we've had these pandemic plans, often based on flu research, and those are all underway. They're there all the time, and we were certainly working ours from the beginning of hearing the first cases in China. And as you've seen, everything, the heroic efforts that the CDC and the federal government are taking. I've said all along that these things are not perfect. I have to keep reminding my own team and myself that if we can get this 80% right, that still makes a huge difference. And if you remember, on that curve, everything we're doing is trying to decrease, slow this disease transmission down. We know it's here. We're slowing it down. We're trying to decrease that logarithmic spread of one person giving to 2 to 3 people and on, so that people stay safer, that we keep you healthy, but also so that our health system can handle the sickest patients. When you are involved in this work, and my colleagues around the country, you'll understand what I mean, is somebody had this famous quote, on the front end of a pandemic, you look a little bit like an alarmist. You look a little bit like a Chicken Little, the sky is falling, and on the back end of a pandemic, you didn't do enough. And that is your fate in my role, and that will be the fate of all of this, because whenever a pandemic has come and gone, or any infectious disease, a preparedness also has an end evaluation. We do a hot wash. We do something called after action, and we look at everything we did and we learn from it. So part of this, learning from the past, actually for me, began with the people who actually invented this curve and who actually invented these plans. As late as this morning, I was on the phone with Dr. Rajiv Venkaya, who was actually working during H5N1 with President Bush. And in the White House, they made this strike team of, I believe it was about 7 brainiacs, to begin some of this complex modeling to try to decide how do we react in a pandemic when we don't have any drugs yet. They invented this whole field of staged interventions and community mitigation with many, many colleagues in the CDC, but that's where it all began. But they actually went as far back as the Spanish flu. So, 1918. And it's so interesting, poor Spain, because they did a lot of the right things, but it got named after them. But in this country, and what's so important, because timing is everything, in a 2-week period, one city took dramatic actions, St. Louis, and 2 weeks later, Philadelphia started doing the same actions. And the trajectories for the two cities were widely different. So we know that balancing the right action at the right time is so important. This work, bird flu was was more deadly than the regular flu, but it wasn't very infectious. H1N1 came along in about 2009. It was spreading more, but it was actually less fatal than the flu. In 2007, there were recommendations made that form a lot of what the CDC is putting out. In 2017, those were looked at again, very famous, and I encourage you all to look at the MMWR from April 21st of 2017. That's a lot of the post-action on H1N1 and what we've learned about flu. But of course, we're in a time where it isn't the flu. This is coronavirus, and every day we're learning something new. And I know that confuses people because, there's multiple conflicting ideas, and experts who do this modeling will differ in how they think it should be done. But by and large, there is a playbook, and we're all executing it, and it's going to unfold in, one state here, one state there. It's going to inch its way forward, but that's what you're seeing unfold. When you're a leader making these tough decisions, you have to get the best advice. And all along, when I advise the governor, as does dozens of experts that have been assembled, we give him our best advice with the best information we have, and that has varied moment to moment. But, we work with the government, we work with the CDC, the White House, ASPR. We work with all sorts of disease modelers. But we also work at the Ohio Department of Health. I have 1,100 employees, many of whom are moving through those same step down to work at home today. I just want to say to them, thank you for all you're doing. I'm going to talk to you soon. This has been crazy, but I'll talk to you more about what's ahead for you. But 113 local health departments in a state like Ohio, where we are very decentralized, they have their own boards and own health commissioners, but they're on the front lines with the plan right now. Those are the ones I told you to send the cookies to. They're working tirelessly around the clock, sleep deprived right now. They're working with mayors, schools, all our hospitals, philanthropy, businesses, heavily involved. And then also, they're the ears on the ground. So information I'm taking in is coming from communities. Every doctor I've ever known in Ohio is calling me, telling me, we can't get equipment, we can't get PPE, or I need your help on this. So all of that from patients and their questions coming to our hotline, all of that information we're taking in and charting a course. So what we are instituting right now has 4 simple rules, and it's called, we went from the containment phase where we hoped, with early diagnostic testing and isolation and quarantine and borders, the dramatic moves that the president took to contain it, but eventually we always knew we'd reach mitigation. And this is very important here for people to understand. It's early, targeted, and layered interventions. Early, targeted, layered. And timing is everything. There's also a matter of how severe a pandemic is. And when you look at the guidance that the CDC put out on schools, it goes from what is guesstimated to be mild to moderate to severe. And that impacts the duration of the interventions you put in place. Now, this disease is interesting for several reasons, and it's different than H1N1 in some circumstances. The travel that we do now is different than 2009. Our dependence, we've learned a lot about, and we'll learn a lot more in days to come about, the PPE, where it's manufactured. We will learn a lot about our medical supply. Our communications and our social networking, all of that is a little different, and it's factoring in, plus the fact that our studies are ongoing all the time. So what are these 4 interventions? They save lives, and they have to be implemented together. If you are sick, number 1, if you are sick, stay home. That is isolation for the ill. Isolation equals ill. 2, if someone in your household is sick, and we've talked a lot about households, you stay home too, and you quarantine. So quarantine is for people who might have been exposed back when we had our 200 and some travelers, but it is for people who should stay at home. 3, social distancing and isolation. That is our 6 feet. That is our mass gatherings eventually as this progresses. That is getting us out of socially dense situations where we have rapid transfer, again, 1 person to 2.28 people now on best estimates and onward. These are the individual controls as well. everything, keep doing it. It so works. The hand washing, the coughing, the not touching your face, which I'm desperately trying not to do. It's hard, I know. And all these things are what matter. Now, last stage, of course, are the things we've taken: school closings, and eventually, if needed, the daycare closings. Those are the hardest, and you'll hear experts debating about this forever on the networks as we speak. And it is because you have to take the risk benefit of it. You have to think about your nurses who have kids in school, and you need that workforce. You're weighing elaborate groups of things, but even in the modeling, they took this into account, and they have what they call cascading consequences. And we're rolling out, we have to move quickly in this case, so we're doing our big rocks. But in the days to come, and just this day, Director Hall, and you've heard about the work she is doing, we will keep layering and layering this response with all the supports that people need. But that is how this works. Now, this is a key point. It's not perfect. Any one of the 4 interventions themselves only does so much. It's like Swiss cheese. Like you have one piece of Swiss cheese and you've got some holes in it. But if you layer Swiss cheese on top of each other, if you do it just right, you can cover up a few more of the holes. It gets harder and get through. So you've got 4 Swiss cheeses. You're getting about 80%, maybe. That's a guesstimate. You'll have to live with me on guesstimates in this world. And therefore, you're getting more impact. And as I said, timing is everything, because it's a lot like a fire. These non-pharmacologic interventions that stall us and slow us down are like when you have a fire on your stove and you have your kitchen extinguisher. You want to get it quick, and you don't want the fire to get out of control. And so you really want to beat that upward slope of infection. Now, that's tricky, and experts are going to disagree, and there'll be postmortems. But you know, when I talk to my colleagues in Washington, they wish they could have done more sooner. And so we're learning from Italy, we're learning from some of the data we're seeing around the world. Interestingly, kids are getting infected. There's one study, I just want to mention this, Japan, because of the Princess cruise ship, that was the one place they actually tested kids, and they found that there are amplifiers. They get infected just as much. They don't get as sick, but they do, and that's why schools and the nasty stuff you were mentioning are important. Now, you can also go too soon, you know, and so it's a delicate balance, because if you go too soon, you exhaust people of doing these measures, and you fatigue folks. But the truth is, we are at that point, from all indications we're seeing, where we're on an upward slope enough that we know, and with the lack of PPE and other things we're taking into account, that moving now is disruptive. It's going to be disruptive because we're going to get there anyways. And the sooner you go, and if you do them together, that's the impact we're after. And we hope we do this well. We hope, again, we mitigate this and we see that drop. Whatever we do will help at this point, and that is what we're doing. Now, very quickly, this is my complex study of predictive analysis, the kind you do on a piece of paper. We know a lot about this disease, but as you know, our diagnostics have been slower, and with our testing, we were sending to the CDC. It took 5 days, but once we've had this testing, we're ramping up. We don't know, for epidemiologists, they have to look at a lot of things. We're looking at the early studies. We're making best guesses. We're talking to the experts who made the model. We're talking to our CDC colleagues. But we can assume a couple things. We can assume, from what we've been hearing, that there's a peak of maybe 40 in some circles to 70%. I've heard numbers as far-ranging as that from experts about how much of the population will eventually become infected. We know a little bit about the R0, which is how much one case infects others. It's roughly estimated, again, these numbers will change, at 2.28. We assume from some early modeling that we've heard on thousands of calls I've been on with thousands of experts. Again, I take the best data. I hear conflicting. I usually use the more cautious and conservative of the data. There may be a peak of this, again, guesstimate still, the modeling is still working, of late April to mid-May. So we took that number backwards. We also know that there's a serial interval, which means this thing is doubling. I've heard as little as 5 days and as much as 7 days. So 5 to 7 days, we're taking 6. So we have guesstimated a peak, and we went to mid-April. We said 60% infection. We worked our way back by the weeks, and we came back to what would 1% be. We roughly guesstimated March 9th. And our population, I have 11.7 million Ohioans as my patients, and we said, we know we have community spread. The data that comes out today will clearly show that these cases don't have a connection to anything we can point them to. We know that we have ICU patients. That's a big trigger for these interventions. We do not have a death yet. We know deaths often lag hospitalizations by 3 to 6 weeks. So even in South Korea, even in Italy, a lot of the data is still behind. And so we used all of that. I think the LG and I, he helped me say, what's 1% of 11 point, no. But so we are saying, I'm not saying there are absolutely for certain 100,000 people. I'm saying I'm guesstimating. If I'm guesstimating community spread, that's my best number. And without that data, as the data comes in, as we have it, as the scientists learn more, as modelers far smarter than I am, put that together, we'll look back at this and we'll see where we were. But so that is that answer. I want to say in closing, as I've always said about public health, the hard thing about this, we're working so tirelessly with our hospital system right now, but everything I learned in med school is just such a small part of all this fabric of things, from childcare to what we do in businesses. All of these things affect our life expectancy. They affect our health and well-being. 2/3 of these things that we have to solve collectively affect us. And so we're moving as best we can along with our fellow states, and you'll see it as best as each state can move given their unique circumstances. Those 2/3 of levers that we do, but 1/3 will be up to you. And so much will depend on us as citizens. We promise you the best information that we know as we know it. On our website, coronavirus.ohio.gov, we will keep posting things. You will see whole new worlds about what we do together. I know there are Facebook groups already deciding things. We know the most vulnerable are at risk. These decisions are not made lightly. They are not made lightly. We talk policy. Most of us have not slept a ton. We are talking policy. Walking here, we'll start talking policy on the way out. None of this is made lightly. And I just really want to say to our teachers out there, one last thing. I was asked, teachers, you can still become a polling worker. Some of us, you'll see redeployment of whole workforces to help out in hospitals and do other things, much more coming. But teachers, you can actually train this weekend, and you can help out the polls if you're healthy. And we want to get people out to vote, voteohio.gov. Thank you.
Questions?
You mentioned before the restrictions that were taken with jails and with prisons. Have there been any suspected cases in any of the state's prison systems or the local prison systems? And is there testing available for them if there should be a suspect?
The testing will be available. I'm not aware of any. That doesn't mean there hasn't been. I'm not personally aware of that. But in regard to the prison, this was a recommendation that came through our director very early on. It seemed to be logical to extend it to the jails. It's the same basic principle. It's a more transient population in jails, but he still is pretty much the same situation.
Dr. Mike, could someone clarify the number of...
I'm sorry.
Could you go through the doctor, could you go through the numbers again? We're at 13. Could you break that down to 14 in L region?
Oh, you're talking about the confirmed cases. All right. You want to go?
They're going to give you an
stop.
update right at the end because the testing results are rolling in. So I'm going to let our comms people give you, they're getting texts while I'm up here.
Who else?
Dr. Acton, could you talk about people who want to donate blood? What is your recommendation for that? And can they screen for COVID-19? Can you talk about that?
That is something I'm not familiar with, so I'll have our team look into it. But blood will become an issue. It isn't right now from what I've heard, but please fact check me on that. But this will be an issue, and we were even talking about it recently. So that'll be one of the many things, the many creative things that are going. The creativity, including a baby boom, I would not be surprised, and a decrease in most infections because we're all washing our hands. But there will be things we learn from this, and doing blood should be a great thing. So stay tuned from Red Cross on that.
For the governor, Ohio's eviction courts are still open. Is that prudent right now in the midst of an outbreak? Besides, the courts themselves are great for transmission of disease and putting people on the street during the
I
pandemic.
talked to a juvenile court judge. I just happened to run into him, Adolfo Tornicio in Xenia, and he was telling me what procedures he was taking. You're seeing judges take steps. He felt that the other judges in Greene County, that's just anecdotal, that's one county, but look, everybody is taking steps, we believe, to separate people. So this is also, when you shut down, and that we're not going to elections, or you shut down the judiciary, it's probably about the last step that you would take. It would have to be a real emergency to do that. We have an emergency, but again, some of these cases can be delayed, and so again, this is a better question to the Chief Justice, but you're seeing courts make decisions about how important something is. If something it can be postponed, you're starting to see courts do that. We would recommend them do that. If there's an urgency, some setting bail, many courts now, as you know, are doing that remotely anyway. Someone is locked up in the county jail. Most courts I'm familiar with, they're doing it by video anyway, so they don't have to move the prisoners. So again, everybody needs to be prudent. Everybody needs to do what needs to be.
Do you have thoughts on evictions specifically, though?
Thoughts on what?
Evictions.
Evictions. I do not have thoughts on evictions per se. Again, these would be things that one would assume could be pushed back. I mean, again, the things that can be pushed back during this period of time. What you're going to run into is the difficulty of court personnel being there. You're going to run into, if anybody's talking about seating a jury, it's going to be difficult. So you have all kinds of problems. And I'm frankly, the Chief Justice has her hands on this. If she is seeing a problem that we need to have legislation to fix, then we certainly will go to the General Assembly to do that.
Governor, a lot of Ohioans live paycheck to paycheck, shutting down the schools, and a lot of them will probably be laid off, at least temporarily. What is your best recommendation for them to, make ends meet?
Well, these are things that we certainly are looking at. I've had some indication that you're going to see some things coming out of Washington. I talked to Rob Portman today. So look, this is a work in progress. We understand that this is going to be difficult for people. What we're trying to do, just as the announcement we made today in regard to food for children, we're trying to, as quickly as we can, put together the support systems that need to be there.
Governor, you had mentioned that daycares are not going to be closed, but if you give any consideration to weddings, a lot of people are worried about going to large weddings. Is that something you're still weighing, or do you think that will?
Well, we did not include, as you know, we did not include weddings and funerals. Again, we would, a lot of this has to be citizens making rational decisions. And, whenever you have a large group come together, there certainly is a danger there. I don't think government can, we've already taken some very drastic actions. We may take more, but a lot of this is going to come down to the individual. Again, you can't write laws to cover every situation. You can't, we were very aggressive in putting the number at 100 as far as people coming together. What happens if someone walks into I think an example I used yesterday, someone walks into a small sports bar or small bar and everybody's crowded in together? That's not a good idea. Now, they legally can do it. It doesn't come under the order, but, you have to be kind of crazy to stay in there. I mean, people need to be just, take some responsibility, and look, you're seeing that. When I'm out today, I see people talking about it. I see people saying, hey, we need to keep this space. I mean, people are getting it. They understand, they're taking that responsibility.
We're also getting a lot of concerns about casinos and the large crowds there. Is anybody...
Casinos are under the same order as every other place. So if they're violating the order, if there are over 100 people, that's a violation. And we would be very anxious to know about it if people are actually seeing that.
Could you talk about what enforcement would look like? Sorry, could you talk about what enforcement would look like then going off that would be the jurisdiction of local law enforcement?
Well, again, I think we would probably be the ones that get the calls. And if you're talking about casinos, they come under the Casino Control Commission. And I know the Casino Control Commission is looking at this. And so the fastest way to get something done there would be simply for the Casino Control Commission to close that casino or to make some orders. And the casinos have to follow those orders. So in each case, the enforcement's going to be different. And I think we have to look to what is the most effective. I get calls. I'm getting calls from mayors. I'm getting calls from people all the time. And sometimes they're saying, "Look, somebody told me this." So this information is coming into us in real time, and we're trying to take action when we're seeing it.
Doctor, can you talk about? You mentioned that you're getting calls from doctors in Ohio. We can't get PPE. Can you give us a sense of what is the inventory? Do all the hospitals have enough PPEs to cover their nurses and physicians?
There is a group, as I had mentioned before, we put together a group of all the major hospital systems in Ohio, primary care associations, primary care practices, our team, our emergency preparedness team who work on this, our plan. And we've known all along there are shortages. I've heard that private doctors have placed orders but are not getting them filled. I think the major distributors, are conserving. We've been in conservation for a while now. The CDC has put out guidance on that, on how to do that. This is part of plans. We do have numbers on that. I'll let my chief information officer give you those because we are getting a little disbursement from the stockpile. We do have a stash of our own. It's a very small stash, but as you know, the CDC has been doing a lot of things like they've asked us not to get rid of expired. They're pretty sure they'll still work. So a lot of us, many, many weeks ago kept all our supplies. But there's a lot of movement going on around the PPE. And obviously, again, all of this is about keeping this, for the sickest folks. And, all of these methods, every kind, you'll see hospitals doing incredible things like the drive-through testing. You're going to see potentially, whole wings of hospitals set up separately. They're all, they're in there. I think that I left, they were still discussing their latest ideas, and then outside units. So whatever this brings us, the hospitals are all working together.
Dr. Evans, we're still very much on the precipice of this. At what point will we know if we have flattened the curve?
I think these numbers and the CDC will be tracking all this. They're also doing some very interesting, we've mentioned briefly, and another time I'll talk more about sentinel surveillance. Many of us are working in that. There'll be a point, and the CDC will probably guide us through that. We'll also have our numbers as a state. I have to say, doing a school measure, you're going to hear things like you should do it for at least 6 to 8 weeks. We've made the step we've taken so that we can better assess. We think we'll have more data. And so, while it could be a longer haul like the CDC sometimes predicts, we're really trying to grow with our understanding. So we're trying to be maximally flexible.
Governor, you received the USDA waiver, and then Lieutenant Governor shows the letter that's going to the administration. What, if anything, in between those two have you requested from the federal government that you haven't gotten yet or is critical at this point?
Let me ask if anybody knows. Tim, you have anything that would not have been in the letter?
No, sir.
That includes everything we've asked for, but as I mentioned earlier, that will not be our last outreach to the administration.
We're going to, as we move forward and as we're talking to superintendents, as we're talking to other people, we will find needs, we will find problems, we will find challenges where we need to get through the bureaucracy or the red tape and where a regulation, frankly, is getting in the way. And again, we start with the idea that this is an emergency, and we should not let regulations get in our way unless they're, basically have to do with safety of people.
Some states have expressed
We're
frustration.
going to go through the process, and we're going to do what we need to do.
Some states have expressed frustration with Washington's speed, but I'm not hearing that from you. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, look, they reacted, the Trump administration reacted in less than 24 hours for these 2 waivers that we wanted, and this was something we talked about just, a day ago here. So, look, we're going to be continuing to work with them, and we'll be on the phone. It's not just a letter. We'll be on the phone and trying to, work these things out. Andy?
Governor, would you like to see some sort of paid family leave in Ohio?
Look, I think anything's on the table. As we don't know how long this is going to be. We need to look at all things. We're certainly in consultation with the leadership of the General Assembly. So, nothing today on that, but it's something that we certainly could look at. Sure.
At what point do we quit testing, and is it when we run out of tests, or what? Where do we go with that?
Not soon enough. The testing is really important to us right now because, at the local health departments, they're very busy right now. You're going to hear as the news of different cases comes and all the contacts and all the layers upon layers. Eventually that becomes more than is feasible, and the CDC, or others will guide us to, it's time to not do that. As I've mentioned, eventually, most ill folks with this will stay home, and your doctor will tell you stay home. They might not even test you, and they'll just say, this sounds a lot like coronavirus. Here's some guidance to get through it, and they'll help you manage that at home. Eventually, the testing might become part of our respiratory panel, as I've said before. So that's all part of the wave that we're seeing as we move through these interventions.
Governor, can you talk about, we talked about people who may get laid off because of this. People have mortgages to pay. Should banks be giving waivers to people who may have difficulty either paying their rent, paying the mortgage? What should you do? What is your recommendation financially out there?
Well, we certainly recommend that banks do that. I mean, look, this is an extraordinary circumstance. It should not really reflect on anyone's credit. If it's a direct result of what we're going through and everybody's feeling this, it would seem to me to be prudent and the good thing to do for the banks or whoever else to take that into consideration. Yes, absolutely.
Governor, Michigan went ahead and canceled schools statewide, and also Governor Whitmer issued an order for mass gatherings of 250 or more. Other states surrounding Ohio have not done that. Are you in contact with other governors to ask them to kind of follow this plan?
Well, I've had conferences with other governors over the last several weeks. We have other conferences that are set up. We exchange ideas. But in the world we live in, if Ohio does something, they know it within 30 seconds. So, everybody is kind of, I'm sure, looking at what everybody else is doing. But ultimately, my responsibility is, of course, to the people of the state of Ohio. But, I have actually been on some national shows, and frankly, the only reason I took them is to say, look, this is what we're seeing in Ohio. This is why we are doing what we're doing. This may look aggressive. I had an interview last night, and the interview was, how come you guys are doing this? You only have so many confirmed cases. And the answer was, look, here's what we're basing this on science. And so as we put that information out, just as I look at what other states are doing and listen to their rationale, I assume that other states are looking at us and to see what our rationale is. And we're very, very open about why we're doing it and what our rationale is.
Governor, the state of Louisiana today postponed this primary, April 4th primary. Has there been any consideration or discussion about postponing Ohio's primary?
Well, I talked to the Secretary of State as late as this morning. We didn't talk specifically about that. We don't see any reason to do this. As I said, people were voting in Xenia, Ohio when I voted a few hours ago. We're telling people to be careful, but Ohio does have early voting, and it gives people an opportunity to kind of spread that voting opportunities out. We've already had a number of people who have voted. And I'm going to let the former Secretary of State address that, and particularly in regard to the problem if you would stop an election. I mean, this election has already started. It's been going on for a number of weeks. John?
Yeah, thank you, Governor. The election's already underway. Voting has started. People are making their decisions. It would be disruptive to the decision-making process. It does not represent a mass gathering. Remember that these are primary ballots. They're shorter ballots, so the efficiency with which people should go through and vote should be improved so that there are no circumstances where we have long lines or problems. That's why we've been asking for the poll workers. I know that just since yesterday, more than 500 people responded to the Secretary's website. He's building the capacity along with the local elections officials to make Tuesday run efficiently. At this point in time, there does not seem to be a reason that you would want to do that. And understand the impact different in Louisiana. I don't believe voting has started in Louisiana yet. You'd be suspending an election right in the middle of voting, which brings its own challenges.
Dr. Acton, can you go talk again about your guesstimate of the 100,000? Are you saying that 100,000 people could be affected in Ohio at a certain date, or that's, can you clarify what you know by that?
You know, what we know is that we have community spread in Ohio, and what we know is that we have folks in ICU, so we have the hospitalization. Those things alone are usually triggers to consider. Our understanding of our cases right now and the numbers we have in Ohio, it's sort of like a star, like you see in the galaxy, and you know that the light travels over light years. So what you're actually seeing by the time you see it is delayed. It's the past. And that in that same way, I feel like the numbers we're seeing in Ohio sort of reflect, are a little bit lagging behind our understanding of rapid diagnostic, really being able to know, identify immediately and circle someone. And with the evidence we've seen of community spread, again, I will say in Ohio, we have had travelers, you know, from all over that came through the 11 airports. We know some people got here that somehow didn't get through that process. We have had every cruise ship imaginable. We have Nile River. We've had people that we had known sources. We have people that will be coming back to Ohio, 33 people from the I believe the Grand Princess, the other ship. They range in age from 30 to 92. They're going to be coming back on a charter plane. We have wraparound for them. It's covered. We have local health departments who will monitor them and quarantine them. So we've been doing this work all along, but what we haven't known is, you know, we had our APEC traveler who was on a school bus, and there were 100 people on that school bus, and then they all went about their business. By the time we knew about APEC, we didn't know who all, and so then you get a random person in a random county, and you just can't connect them back anymore. And so we're seeing this, it's gonna feel a lot like whack-a-mole. It's gonna be all over every county. We already had schools closing in small counties that had people, so many people under investigation that it became, you know, an issue to deal with. And a lot of these decisions, I have to tell people, we're asked to make them because the need for, if you do these things too intermittently, they don't work, just like the Swiss cheese. And sometimes different industries come to us and say, we need clear guidance. We need to do this uniformly as an industry. So sometimes the orders we do are very helpful to the people we're doing the orders on. They're meant to be providing that guidance across the state uniformly. So I'll go back. I think you can watch the repeat of my numbers, and I can show you my card. Thank you.
Dr. Acton, can you speak about the cases in Cincinnati and if they're being followed after being confirmed?
That would be the local health department, and the hospital.
Governor, you mentioned your lack.
Talk about toilet paper for a minute. That was hard the other night. It was insane.
Toilet paper, okay.
I noticed that, and what would you tell people about panic buying?
This was the young lady that you and I were standing by. Is that? She had a little extra toilet paper she was taking home, I guess.
Because you know that they're going to Kroger's tonight after work.
Well, I would tell people to be prudent, and we're all in this together. So if you go in and wipe out a whole shelf of whatever something is, it's probably not helpful to your friends. You know, buy what you need. You know, we've told people for some time that they need to kind of, you know, have an emergency food and other things. So you know, over time they can certainly accumulate that. But you know, we're all in this together. Don't go taking other people's stuff, and just you know, doesn't make any sense.
Governor, you mentioned relaxing regulations.
I'll remember that, Mr. Oddie. So, yeah, good. Thank you for the toilet paper question.
You mentioned relaxing regulations when it comes to the daycares and the ratio there. Are there more details about what that's going to look like?
Yeah, we'll have more details. I don't know, Kim, if you want to share anything now.
Yes, thank you. We will have information out here shortly in alignment with the emergency rules. We heard from the industry that they were looking for at least a 20% or so degree of flexibility on the ratios, and what we're proposing and planning to implement would be slightly above that. So we're hopeful that that would give a little bit of breathing room, such that if you have an instructor that's out, you can leverage your remaining instructors across your classrooms with slightly larger, we're not talking significant increases, but with slightly larger numbers of children there in the room, such that the providers can still provide the service, and then parents that need to go to work and avail themselves of the child care still have that resource.
And this is an example of something that we're going to have to, we will continue to monitor, and you'll continue to have to make decisions about them. Anybody else?
Governor, have you talked about if you have any concerns that participation returning to the election in that or the upcoming census, I guess ongoing now, might be lowered by this? For example, in rural parts of Ohio where people might have been more reliant on libraries for internet access to do that online, those might be closed now?
Well, I'm not going to comment about the census, but as far as the voting, I would just encourage people to vote. You know, I've been running for office a long time, and I never can predict what the vote turnout's going to be. This is a different circumstance, certainly, but, you know, people are voting right now all throughout Ohio. As I said, I saw people standing in line in Xenia. Not a long line, but they stood in line for a little bit. And so people are showing up, they're voting, and it's just important. I mean, it's important that people continue to do this. They can take, you know, the normal precautions that they need, or extraordinary precautions that they need to make sure that they don't have a problem. Just everybody needs to be careful, but that's true, you know, going to the grocery store. That's true whatever people are doing. They just need to be careful. Voting is just one more thing, but it's certainly a very, very important civic duty, and I would urge everyone to, you know, to go out and vote. It's important.
Governor, Ohio State University is telling its students to leave the dormitories. Are other public universities going to be doing the same?
You know, I don't have any update on that, what they're going to do. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Can we get those updated numbers here?
Here you go. Why don't you come here? Why don't you come here? Right there. No, they need to hear you.
Okay, ready? Okay, let me know when you're ready. Okay, 8 males. Butler 2, or I'm sorry, now you confuse me. Belmont 2,